Alright, here we go. Welcome. This is a video series on scratch building the tube amp that I'm going to be making. And today I'm just going to be going over parts and components necessary to complete this project. Gathering the parts is, well, I guess the first step is deciding on what to build. And then once you know that, or once I know that, getting the parts, which I have all the parts to start to build. I'm just going to quickly go over some things that I like to use, take it or leave it. This is just the way I do it or been doing it. And so let's get going. I'll quickly going to go over what I'm making. This is a pretty simple amp. It's a Princeton Reverb with a few things different about it than just a standard Princeton Reverb. There's going to be no tremolo, just reverb. It will have the reverb, but there's not going to be tremolo for a couple reasons. It's just going to, everything's going to fit better in this chassis without the trem. And with the golden age of pedals that we are in right now, there's some awesome tremolo pedals. Don't get me wrong, I've made tremolo circuits in amps, and they're cool. They're vintagey sounding. They're pretty sweet. But in this amp, there's going to be I'd rather have the. If I had to pick, I will take the reverb. So I'm also going to be adding a mid control in the tone stack. It, to me, is really worth doing. It sounds really good, and with the treble, middle, and bass, you can really shape the tone. And since it's a Princeton, it's got that clean sound. It takes pedals really well. GZ34, it's definitely going to have that. When I say slight modifications, I'm just talking about screen resistor on the output tubes, grid stops, certain places. The last Princeton I made, it had that classic farty, flubbyish sound when it started to break up, which is really annoying. So putting a grid stopper resistor on the phase inverter really helped. I got to double check what I did, but I know by the end of it, that thing sounded awesome, cranked. It sounded really good. And that's because of the cathodyne phase inverter, which I will get into at another time. So let's get into some of the actual parts now. For the turret board, I'm going to be using a turret board. I'm going to be using the G10 epoxy board. This is black. It is, obviously it's black. It's 3 millimeters, 1/8 inch. That's what I like. I also like the gold turrets, brass, as opposed to the silver turrets. We'll mention why maybe another. Well, I'll just say quickly, I had a bad experience with the silver ones at one point, and I just like those better. I've never had a problem. They seem to solder faster and better, so I'll pay a little extra for those. By the way, some of the parts. They're all brand new. I just got these in the mail from Antique Electronic Supply, or AES. I use them a lot. I like them a lot. They're also called amplified parts, all the same thing. And I scavenge around. I get what I need wherever I can find it, basically. But they supply definitely a lot of what I use. But not all. Sometimes I can't find a Tolex I want. Sometimes I can't find a chassis that I want. So as far as scratch building the amps, which this whole series will be about, that means drilling your own chassis. And as far as the chassis goes, I'll just say this is as scratch as I'm going to get with this amp. I'm not going to be bending my own chassis. But it is a blank chassis, which is 16 by 8 by 2 inches. And it is Hammond painted steel. I've used this exact chassis in another amp, and I really like it. It's solid, constructed very solidly. So that's the chassis, that's the turret board, that's the turrets, the gold turrets. I guess let's move on to transformers real quick. Nothing surprising here, just a Hammond power transformer. Let's see. This one has the choice of 630 volt center tapped or 550 volt center tapped at 115 milliamps, which is good. That's nice. I like that. That's plenty of milliamps. And I also, when I can, I always try to get 630 or even 600 volts. Using 315 gets you closer to the schematic. So this is going to be great. The one thing is it has 2 amps for the 5 volt winding, which to me doesn't matter because a GZ34 is going in this thing. And so, with that said, it's just something to note though. Your choice, if the normal Princeton power transformer has 3 amps, I believe, if you want to use a 5U4. For the output transformer, it's something a little different than the standard output transformer for this amp, so I guess that's another little difference. I'm going to be using this guy, who's been kicking around the shop for a while. When Classic Tone went out of business, I bought a bunch of their transformers, and I had used them before then too. They were actually my go-to for transformers. And usually it's brand new old stock or whatever you want to call it, but it's brand new. It's, you know, the vintage paper wound transformer that's going to go, I think, really well with this particular amp. It is meant for a 5E3, so the primary winding is 8K as opposed to 8.5K. I do have a brand new Hammond output transformer just in case for something, you know. Well, I just have it. So this is for what they say for the Princeton 15 watt, 8 ohms, 8.5K center tapped versus 8K, which may actually have some desirable effects. So that takes care of the transform. Oh, reverb driver. Gotta have that if you want reverb. I think that's a Mojo Tone reverb driver. So, transformers, check. Let's get into some other parts in a grab bag. So this bag is from AES as well. It just came in the mail. Tube sockets. Definitely something to not skimp on, money-wise. Get some good ones. They don't have to be the most expensive, but I use the Belton. These are the 9-pin minis. Belton, good stuff, worth it. Tube shields, got some, you know, I guess they're Belton too. Some good tube shields. The 8-pin octals, same story, Belton. And these little death grip things. So yeah, tube sockets, definitely don't get the cheapest ones you can. For me, I've never once had a problem using these tube sockets. I have had problems with other ones. Just saying. Filter caps, they're going to be F&T. Like I said, they're going to be, as opposed to the Princeton usually. It doesn't matter if somebody wants to use a can. There's no wrong way. You know, there's nothing wrong with a can cap, a multi-section can capacitor. Can definitely save you some space. I've used them before for sure. So, but for this amp, I'm going to be using individual F&T filter capacitors. Good stuff. F&T, as far as electrolytics go, are my go-to for filter capacitors and stuff. This is just shielded. Looks like, yeah, some shielded wire, which you're going to use for the inputs. Another thing to, in my opinion, don't skimp on or don't get the cheapest ones, is get good jacks. Just go with Switchcraft, in my opinion. That's what I do. I always use Switchcraft jacks, Switchcraft RCA plugs. As far as like RCA plugs, there's some good ones that aren't Switchcraft. But I just, keeping it simple. Switchcraft this is for the speaker and foot switch. These other ones were the shunt. The grounded inputs for the inputs. Let's see what else. Pots. Alpha for the win. Alpha for the win. So I'm going to be using alpha pots. I use alpha pots all the time in all the amps I build. Now, I used CTS at first, and I had some just scratchy pots, and I had another thing. I'm not knocking CTS. I use CTS in all my guitars. They're not bad pots at all. But I've just had zero issues with alpha pots, and I can also find the values that I need with the alpha pots, and they're consistent. And I have noticed their tolerances measure much more consistently or closer to the stated value than the CTS pots. I sleep better knowing I'm putting alpha pots in my amps. Alpha pots are technically cheaper money-wise, but quality, they are my go-to when it comes to amps. I've never had a problem with them. I am using a CTS biasing pot, though. I also like to use the 3-prong receptacle, the IEC receptacle for the 3-prong power cord, as opposed to hardwiring the power cord into the amp. To me, that just makes way more sense. It's cleaner. If you do it the old vintage way, there's nothing wrong with it. And I'm not here to say what's right or wrong. This is all my opinion. As far as capacitors go, film caps will be a variety. For the tone section, I'll be using Sozos. You do not have to get the most expensive caps to build an incredible sounding tube amplifier. I just like these. I like the way they look. They're not the most expensive, but they're not the cheapest. Sozos. What is that doing in there? Further down the line, I've been using orange drops just because I've never had a problem. They're reliable. Electrolytic capacitors. This is for what is this? It's for the bias. I've been using the mod and same with the cathode bypass caps. I've been using the mod electrolytics and been real happy with them. Here's some of the been real happy with those. Let's see. What else? As far as capacitors and resistors go, I'm going to go more into detail about what I use when it comes time to actually add the components into when I'm making the circuit board. So these are just, and I'm not even talking about parts and stuff you'll need to make the cabinet, like a handle, the rubber feet, corners if you want them, the Tolex glue, all that stuff. So there is all those other things though. And there's all the nuts and bolts that you're going to need. I have a bunch around the shop, but here's one thing I have of. I use these for tube sockets and yeah. I've never built a kit. I've always done scratch builds. I like the you can make it how you want. It's definitely way more work. Way more work. Just machining that chassis out over there. Just getting that thing machined out and cleaned out. All the holes nice and clean. Laid out as perfect as you can get. With no extra holes is quite a feat. So we'll see. We'll see if I end up with any extra holes. It's happened before. It's not a huge deal if that does happen. But yeah, that's a lot of work. And there's so much work that goes into all this before you even get to the fun part, which is soldering and wiring the amp up. That comes way later. The speaker, take a quick look. Good stuff. So yeah, that's the speaker that's going in. So, but in this case, it is a combo with the 12-inch, and I'm going to be making the cabinet from scratch as well and Tolexing it and all that. But that's later. I'm definitely going to rough out the cabinet and dry fit the parts before I continue with any kind of soldering though. But I'll get to that later. So the next step in this process, the next video, should probably be about getting the chassis laid out and machined and ready to go. Then once that's done, we'll go from there. But it'll be a journey from just getting the parts like I have, and I've gone over most of the parts that you need, to the final sound check. Oh, you need a pilot light. Let me grab those. Got them over here somewhere. Since I have them, I'm going to be using these a purple pilot light, the Marshall style, 6 volt. I'll go over that when I wire it up, what you got to do for that. But you do need to get one of these clips. I'm using it because I have them, and it's just something a little different. I'm tired of the old Fender style. I like the Fender style and the jewels and all that, but I like the purple light, and I've used it before, been happy with it. But it's up to you as far as what kind of the Fender. I'm not knocking the Fender style. Let's see, anything else I can think of? I think that's about it for this video. Excited to show you more and get into this build. Should be fun. There's all kinds of there's face plates. You got to think about that. I'll show you what I do in another video. So yeah, there's going to be a bunch of videos about this amp, and hopefully it'll be fun. Tube amps are beautiful things. They're like instruments to me, and every amp is a little. You got to let the amp become what it wants to be almost. So we're gonna not stop on this until this amp is sounding incredible. It's gonna rip. So excited about it. Feel free to subscribe and like if you want to follow along on this build. And I will see you next time. Take care.